I spoke with President Trump for 20 minutes about the situation with Iran, saying if the Iranians try to target U.S. ships in this area, they will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth.
State media that a U.S. warship has turned back from the area of the Strait of Hormuz.
Iranian state TV said on Monday its navy had forced a U.S. warship to turn back from entering the crucial waterway. The semi-official Fars news agency said 2 missiles struck the warship near the port of Jask. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that a warning shot was fired against a U.S. warship to prevent its entry into the strait.
The president is crashing out as it appears his fresh attempt to fix a disaster that he created in Iran suffered a fresh blow. And despite the best efforts from his chief propagandists over at state regime media Fox News, it's still apparent that Trump's humanitarian gesture, as it was described yesterday, to guide stranded ships out of the narrow waterway that the US has blockaded as leverage over Iran, has run into a few speed bumps.
So we are saying the Iranians do not have control of the strait. We have absolute control of the strait.
A few moments later,
Donald Trump's constant taunting of Iran has backfired as a major escalation event just took place. Iran has officially struck a port area in the United Arab Emirates, also after striking a South Korean ship as well as a UAE ship. Now, this follows Donald Trump saying that the United States was entering the Strait of Hormuz to escort ships. CENTCOM posted that 2 U.S.-based ships had been transiting the Strait of Hormuz. This followed Donald Trump's social media post saying that the U.S. Navy was going to head in and escort ships, to which some members of the United States military at a leadership level tried to pull those statements back and say, no, we're just going to be providing some guidance and logistical support to ships already in the Strait of Hormuz to help coordinate when the Strait of Hormuz opens. According to Iran, they saw certain moves that were happening in the Strait of Hormuz that signaled that the U.S. was working with the United Arab Emirates to bring some of these ships out of the Strait of Hormuz. And then the UAE took action.
The 79-year-old president painted himself as a peacemaker on Sunday night as he announced on Truth Social, quote, Project Freedom, the sequel to Project Epic Fury, that would help solve the problems in the Strait of Hormuz, allegedly.
Project Freedom launched this morning. The president calls it a humanitarian effort to safely guide some 800 cargo ships and tankers and their 20,000 crew members safely out of the Strait of Hormuz. The president says these stranded ships are running out of food and supplies and are merely neutral bystanders in this whole thing. In a very lengthy Truth Social post, President Trump went on to say, for the good of Iran, the Middle East, and the United States, we've told these countries that we will guide their ships safely out of these restricted waterways so that they can freely and ably get on with their business. The ship movement is merely meant to free up people, companies, and countries that have done absolutely nothing wrong. They are victims of circumstance. This is a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the U.S., Middle Eastern countries, but in particular, the country of Iran. The president warned Iran that any interference with this humanitarian mission will be, quote, dealt with forcefully. CENTCOM says guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, and 15,000 service members are supporting this mission. Project Freedom is described as a coordination and information sharing effort to help guide these ships safely through the Strait of Hormuz. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. Navy ships will not be escorting ships through the strait.
Iran, however, responded swiftly, warning that it would strike any U.S. ship that attempted to approach, which proved to then be true, seeing as NBC reported not long after that Iran did fire cruise missiles and drones and launched several small boats to target U.S. flagged ships in the Strait of Hormuz, but no vessels were hit and no one was injured, according to the commander of U.S. Central Command. It has then since been reported by the U.S. military that they destroyed 6 Iranian small boats while intercepting cruise missiles, but Iran then disputed those claims. But the thing is, if you were to flick over to the Murdoch Manipulation Network, you'd hear propaganda that would make North Korean media look like NPR. They gleefully discussed how Trump told Fox News that if Iran targets U.S. ships in the Strait of Hormuz during Project Freedom, they would, quote, be blown off the face of the earth. More rhetoric akin to a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. Who can forget that banger, which was then followed up 2 days later with peace negotiations are going great.
Trey.
Sandra, good afternoon. I spoke with President Trump for 20 minutes about the situation with Iran. He talked about Project Freedom and the U.S. efforts to guide vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, issuing a new warning to the Iranian regime, saying if the Iranians try to target U.S. ships in this area, they will be, quote, blown off the face of the earth. Remember, this was a project implemented by the Americans overnight to assist the hundreds of vessels that are currently trapped in the Persian Gulf. We're talking about more than 20,000 sailors. And the president told Fox he's doing this for humanity. Some of these sailors were running out of food and supplies on these vessels due to the Iranian threats that are ongoing in this area. And again, the president saying that if U.S. ships in the region are targeted, the Iranians will be blown off the face of the earth. Now, I also asked President Trump about the possibility of negotiations with Iran succeeding. He said the Iranians are being far more malleable than they were being in the past, showing flexibility given the U.S. pressure that continues as part of the American blockade of Iranian ports. President Trump called that blockade the greatest military maneuver in history. As it relates to the combat preparations that continue across the region, President Trump understands there are two paths here. The Iranians either make a good faith deal or ultimately combat operations could resume. And President Trump told Fox News that right now they have bases all over the world. There are American preparations underway. He said they're all stocked with equipment and we can use all of that stuff. And if he needs it, he will use it. But the headline here, Sandra, the president issuing a new warning to the Iranian regime if they do fire on U.S. vessels in the Persian Gulf or near the Strait of Hormuz. And today we can report, according to CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, there were multiple attempts on American vessels and merchant ships in this region. And Cooper says that there were U.S. efforts to shoot down both missiles and drones in the Persian Gulf as these Iranian efforts to attack vessels in the region continue. Sandra?
But the thing is, when these threats are met with renewed attacks on both the United Emirates and ships in the Strait of Hormuz, it sends a contradictory message to that in which Trump and Hegseth are projecting. It's clear that Iran are not backing down to Trump or what he has described as, quote, the greatest military maneuver in history. That's right. Move over Normandy. We've got the Strait of Hormuz blockade that Trump orchestrated to try and fix the problem that he created.
Now, I also asked President Trump about the possibility of negotiations with Iran succeeding. He said the Iranians are being far more malleable than they were being in the past, showing flexibility given the U.S. pressure that continues as part of the American blockade of Iranian ports. President Trump called that blockade the greatest military maneuver in history.
Need I remind everyone that the Strait of Hormuz was open and free passage happened on the daily before this. But Fox News continue to regurgitate this message and mislead their audience into believing that this war sold to the American people as small in scope, which the likes of Mike Johnson ate up and spat back out as they continued to fund the whole war to the tune of $1 billion a day on taxpayer dime, is somehow going swimmingly and that it's an overwhelming success.
It's incredibly frustrating, Sean. And if the American people want the truth, they definitely should not pick up the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or watch CNN, especially these days in the midst of this incredibly successful military operation against Iran. It's almost like these legacy American media outlets were rooting for the Iranian regime over the American people, over our great United States military, because they are so rooted in their opposition to President Trump rather than seeking and reporting on the facts.
But you are not serious people.
And also, no, to the Trump sycophants out there reporting on what is actually happening, the facts over the fairy tales that Trump projects, that's not siding with Iran or wanting America to lose, as we've heard from the likes of Heineken Hegseth during his testimony, but it's simply reporting on what is actually happening, not shouting hoorah loud enough to drown out dissent.
Well, honestly, what has been holding me back is I feel like the change that I was expecting from the president himself, I don't feel in my everyday life, which is concerning to me. I still feel obviously that, prices are very, very, very high. If you're going to the grocery store or just in general, because inflation still exists. Unfortunately, now we have the higher gas prices, which really hurt, everyday people in their pocket. And I've voted my entire life. And the frustration right now is, it's just unbelievable because, what really changes? I just feel like that we're kind of, kind of steering the ship in the same direction.
Because that's what they want, right? That's exactly how the Trump administration wishes the media would cover this entire situation. They want compliance. They don't want you to look under the hood at how much this is costing, how it impacts gas prices at home, the extent of the damage that the US military is facing overseas, which a new report suggests is a hell of a lot more than they're letting on.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.